So we can jump right into today's lesson. We did an activity yesterday. For those of you who were here, it was super fun. The vertical angles activity. I'm hoping that you guys remember those relationships that formed. But that's basically what we're going over today, is that thing that you discovered yesterday. So if you remember the angles that were across from one another, they had the same measure. The angles right next to each other added to 180. If you remember that, you're going to be good to go today. All right? But we got to define these things first. We don't just call them the angles across from each other. They do have a special name. They're called vertical angles. It's two angles that are not adjacent, and their sides are formed by two intersecting lines. So the angles that are next to each other, those are called a linear pair. So two angles whose non-common sides are on the same line. So they're adjacent angles. They're right, they share a side, share a vertex. The other side that they don't share is actually on the same line. Linear pair. It has the word line in it. Linear. And we know that straight angles measure to 180. So that's going to be a good clue as to what's to come. So here's an example of vertical angles. The vertical angles here are the ones that are not right next door. So we have two lines that intersect. The ones across from each other are vertical angles. So angle 1 and angle 3 are vertical angles. Okay? Angle 2 and angle 4 are also vertical angles. Now, do you remember what you discovered about vertical angles yesterday? They're congruent. So I'm going to add that right here. Vertical angles are congruent. All right, and next we have a linear pair. Linear pairs form a line when you put them next to each other, right? So here angle 1 and angle 2 are a linear pair. I'm not really going to write that because they're the only angles there. But I am going to write that linear pairs are what? Do you guys remember from yesterday? Supplementary, good, meaning they add to 180. All right, any questions so far? All right, so we are determining whether the angles are vertical angles, a linear pair, or neither, and we're just looking at the ones that have the numbers in it. So are these two a linear pair, or are they vertical angles?
Neither.
Because they're supposed to be congruent and they're not congruent.
Yeah, they're not congruent. Vertical angles would be like if this had a 1 in it, 1 and 2. Now, they don't look like the linear pair from the last example, but look, they do form that straight line with their sides. So this is a linear pair, yes.
I need to get back in shape.
On the vertical angles thing, that's exactly the same.
It depends on which ones have the number. The vertical angles are across from each other. So if this would have been like this one and this one, if this would have had like a 3 in it, 3 and 1 would have. It's the ones across from each other. Let's see if we have one that end up being vertical.
No, neither.
These are neither. The problem here is this little like creak in the line, right? That has to be an actual line. It can't change directions and be a vertical angle. So that's neither. Okay, now this one. Do you see how they're across from each other and the lines are intersecting? One more trick is to trace the angles. If it makes two V's that are pointing at one another, vertical. Okay? which number 2 might trick you up on that, but it actually has to be straight lines. So those are vertical angles. So it has are these two across from each other? Hold on. Of course my iPad freezes right there. This one and this one. You have to look at the ones with the numbers in them.
Crappy.
Okay? All right. Here is number 4. So we are going to see if we can figure out the measure of all the missing angles when we're given just one of the angles. So again, think back to what we did yesterday with the protractors. So which one of these do you know right away?
Number 2.
Number 2. It's what?
35.
35 degrees. Good. So these two are vertical angles. They're congruent right across from each other. All right, angle 1 and angle 3 are both missing.
145.
How'd you get 145?
Because I'm add to 180.
Yeah, these two are a linear pair. Angle 1 and the angle we were given. So I can do 180 minus 35. I get 145. Now, what do I know about 1 and 3? They're congruent. So if angle 1 is 145, the measure of angle 3 is also 145 degrees. What are your questions? Once again, on number 5, there is one we know right away.
28.
2.
The measure of angle 2 is 28 degrees. Good. And these are vertical angles. Now, how am I going to find the other angles? 180 minus 28.
102? No, my bad. 130. 152, yeah.
152. Good. That's the measure of which one?
1, 3.
Both of them. Yeah. Once you find the measure of one, just remember the other one is congruent. All right. So the measure of angle 2, since it's vertical, is what? 124. That's the easy one.
156.
56? For which one?
130.
1 and 3. Good. And how'd you get that?
Add 180.
Yeah, decide what you'd add to 124 to make 180. So basically 180 minus 124. Questions? All right. All right. Now, I will tell you that it's not always angle 2 that's the vertical angle. I feel like in all the ones we've looked at, it's gone around in that manner. So don't just automatically think it's always going to be angle 2 is the congruent one. The numbers will switch up a little bit. But in this case, it is the vertical angle. So what is the measure of angle 2? 67. And how am I going to find 1 or 3? Subtract it from 180. So 180 minus 67. 113 and 113. Questions? All right. So what do you think we need to do to set up an equation here?
Subtract 42. I think.
And
Subtract 4y to 2y.
no, you're gonna add the 4y to 2y. You're gonna get 6y.
Oh, okay. We got lots of ideas. Let's back up a second. What kind of angles are these that have the expressions in them? These are vertical angles. Vertical angles are congruent. Congruent means what? They have the same measure. They're equal. So in order to solve this, we need to just make these two things equal. Okay? That is the struggle of geometry. Do they add to 180? Do they add to 90? Or are they equal? Basically, when in doubt, pick one of those things. Hopefully an educated guess. Maybe an eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'm not sure. But that's usually what you're up to. Okay? Now, what should I do to find the y? Subtract the 4y. Good. Hey. Okay, then what?
Divide by 2. Negative 2.
All right, and y equals 21 was correct. Any questions? Number 9. What type of angles are we looking at here? These are also vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent. So when I write my equation, I'm just going to have one expression equals the other. So 13x plus 16, that's this angle over here, equals this angle over here. Now I'm going to solve for x. I'm going to subtract 13 from both sides, which should work 13x, which should work out nicely because it just gives us 1x. Then what? Subtract 7. Subtract 7. So x equals 9. All right, what are we looking at here?
Subtract 3 from 89.
What types of angles are these? These are vertical angles, and vertical angles are
Congruent.
congruent. Congruent means equals. So 2r plus 3 equals 89. Then what?
Subtract 3 from 89, and then 2r equals 86, which is 43.
Divide, which is 43. Good. And remember, you can always double check. You can plug it back in for the r. Do the math. If you get two angles that aren't equal, you know you did something wrong. All right, what are we looking at here?
Some non-congruent angles.
They're non-congruent. That's a good start. Okay, so I'm not going to make them equal. But what am I going to do? What are they?
Subtract.
First, I have to write an equation.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do?
We're gonna set it equal to 180.
Yeah, I'm going to add these.
So when it's not congruent, that's when we put it to 180.
Well, it depends what the relationship is. These are a linear pair because they make a line. See that?
Mm-hmm.
So, like they have this side in common. Look at the other two sides. Do they make a line? They do. So it's a linear pair. Linear pairs have a measure of 180 degrees. So I'm just going to add the two angles. So the one angle is 15t. The other angle is 20t plus 5. Put a plus sign in the middle. Puts equal 180. And then we can do the math. So what is 15t plus 20t? 35t. Plus 5 equals 180. Then what?
Minus 5 is gonna be 1.
Subtract 5 from both sides. So we have 35t equals 175.
That's 5.
And then when you divide both sides by 5, you do end up with t as 5. T, R, whatever. All right, questions?
Yeah.
Yes? No. All right, once again, we got to decide what the heck we're looking at. Are these vertical angles that we're going to make equal? Are they a linear pair that we're going to add to 180, or do we need a whole different strategy altogether?
Like some linear pairs. Am I right? No. How? Oh, they can run.
Yeah, these are right across from each other. They make the V's when you outline them. So they are verticals, so we are going to make them equal to one another. You guys just give it a couple minutes. We're almost done. All right, so I'm left with 1x, or just x, equals 16. What are your questions? All right, real quick. Angle 4 and angle 5. What type of angles are those? I just drew them. This isn't in your notes. They are congruent angles because they are vertical angles, and if I'm writing an equation, I would make them equal to each other. Good. Angles 6 and 7 are what? They're not congruent. They're a linear pair. How would I write an equation for those? Add them to 180. Good. So I'm going to give you guys your homework. You have a lot of time to work on them. If you want to listen to music, that's fine. Remember, when you come in tomorrow, we are going over that quiz. We are going over that homework that you're about to do right now. And then we're doing a maze activity to review some angle stuff.